had a reservation in Kansas, which was quite extensive. It wasn't at the Missouri line, it was west of the Missouri-Kansas line, and it went from north to south and quite a ways west, all the way up to probably past Wichita. We bought it for the Cherokees. It was our land in the first place. We had to give it up and gave it to the Cherokees, and then we had to buy it back. And then, like I said earlier, we quite literally walked down here. At some point in time, they purchased our reservation in Kansas, and with that money, we bought what is now our reservation in Oklahoma in Osage County.
By being forced on this reservation, we could not hunt and do our traditional ways. We had to rely on rations from the government to survive. So we were not in a great position to protect ourselves and our families from that period of time. The fact that it was rocky lands, it would have been of no value to a farmer. So you can imagine the benefits of moving to this area. But the cattle drives would come through here because of the grasslands. So we knew that there would be an economy here that could sustain us. What we didn't know was that there was this oil field under the ground that was of vast quality, of high grade, that was an enormous abundance. At the time the Industrial Revolution was kicking into full gear to fight World War I, the machinery ran on oil to make the, to fuel that effort, and so the tanks and the troops and the cars that were of the day all ran on oil drilled from the Osage Nation. I mean, when you put it in 1920s dollars, a $15,000 quarterly payment check was, if you adjust it for inflation, is worth several $100,000, and they were getting that every quarter, individually. So if there's 5 individual family members, each one of them's getting that same amount. So you can see how quickly their wealth escalated during the height of that boom era. And so, you can do the math in your head and just realize that that kind of money coming into such a small number of people, word was going to get out, and it did.
Oh yeah, that's what attracted the nefarious, but glamour, oh, most assuredly. I mean, down on that little Kahika, the little street with all the shops, there was maybe 3-4 times that many shops with the latest fashions. So you would see probably somebody's mother in their everyday Osage dress, and there would be their daughter, just dressed, smartly with a hat and shoes. And I just love the one picture of my grandmother. She's like in a beautiful dress, and you can tell that her stockings are silk, and she's got the bob cut, So yeah, there was tons of glamour. I'm always saying, just think of Downton Abbey, but with Osages. And servants and big homes and matriarchs and, the whole deal.
Gee, we bought big cars, big expensive cars, and when the ashtrays got dirty, when they got flat tires, just leave it alone and buy a new one. False. Not true. There were people who had big expensive cars.
One Osage woman here in this area, between Hominy and Skytook, I think is where her ranch was, her allotment. Her and her husband invested into a racing horse called the Black Gold. The Black Gold became a celebrated racehorse of its day. And in 1923, there's also the story of this Black Gold winning the Kentucky Derby that year. I suppose, in a way, it wasn't like it was seen as a curse at the time, because many people didn't understand the industrial uses of oil and how valuable it was going to be. They just knew it was there. But they also used it as an asset to leverage, considerations for their families that were coming into all this wealth.
There are a lot of probably get-rich hustlers, gamblers, people of ill repute came in, get-rich schemes. People, not just remove Indians for their money, but remove everybody from their money, take it and leave. You know, but there are a lot of boom towns around here, especially up north, and they're gone now. But they were boom towns then, and they were oil field towns. You know, so.
They did not see an Osage life as equal to theirs. How dare these Osages think they own that oil? That's my oil. That's my money from the oil. That's my, you know, if I have to overcharge every Osage that comes in the store, I'm going to get my share of this money. If you know, there's an attitude. I think David Grant said it best when he was interviewed in his book, promoting his book. He said, it was so systematic and it was everywhere. So the question isn't who was in on it. The harder question might be, who wasn't? Because even though we had lost a lot of Osages during that time, and a lot of those headright shares fell into non-Indian hands, non-Osage hands. So these were just, you know, when the writers of the day were celebrating the lavish lifestyles and the spending, they left a lot of it out of the price that these Osages were paying, and why they turned to a different religion, why they turned to substance abuse, why they held so fervently to their old adopted new traditions, like the dances from the punk and the cause that identify us in our communities as a new way of survival.
It happened everywhere, and various degrees or some other way. You know, people want it, they'll take it. They'll find some way to take it. You know, and that's what happened here. The people that took the money they wanted, they were greedy and heartless. You know, and one thing that folks must understand is the Burkhardt brothers. They went where the money was. My grandfather was bilingual, spoke Osage, spoke English. Grew up in the boys' Indian school, but he was also a rodeo cowboy. He was a steer roper. He was also a ranch cowboy. He was a World War I veteran. Went off to. He didn't have to go, but I think he volunteered. He was a non-commissioned officer with an artillery section. Went to France, came back, and was died in the house where he lived.
My own mother, who was the product of an arranged marriage, which was done, and she was born in 1932. Both sets of my grandparents, let's put it this way too, were all married like 4 and 5 times, but I think that's just the way it was back then. You didn't date, you married, you know. And her 4th or 5th husband really was the love of her life, and the one that my mother felt was her father. She didn't care for her biological father. And they left her very wealthy, and they died within a week of each other of cancer. And for years, I thought she had died of ovarian cancer. But then later on, one of my sisters said, no, it was some kind of stomach cancer. But it was just so tragic for her. And my mother was, I think, 14, maybe 13, 14, when they both passed like that, and left her a very wealthy little girl. And also, the book, with all its fabulous research, made me question every tragic death in my own family. Because I'm 3/4 Osage. My mother was a full-blood. My father is half. And that's something, those stories are stuff that we always lived with and knew about.
And the legend was my granddad come in one evening in February, laid down on a couch, went to sleep, and never woke up. I don't think it happened that way. If you can read a bit about the anguish he went through before he died. Supposedly by poison whiskey. And I suspect that the man who gave him that poison whiskey was a man by the name of Kelsey Morrison. Kelsey was a known bootlegger. He's convicted in federal court for bootlegging. And, and he was also supposedly poisoned other people. Strychnine, and that's, all of that's in the book.
He didn't infatuate himself with the community by being a jerk and a killer. That came later. You know, in order to have the influence to do all the damage he did, he showed up at everyone's event. He supported their causes. Hell, he even led the effort to find the killers to these people that are getting, you know. I mean, it took a lot of bravado to do that, you know, and not blink, knowing what you were doing. But he wasn't alone. He was just extraordinarily unconcerned about the consequences of what he was doing.
And it's so weird because, you know, I'll see the pictures of him and plus everybody thought he was their friend. So, you know, like the big picture out there, he was a part of that. You know, I'll see him standing off in other pictures. And I'm just going, oh my God, he's just sitting there looking at everybody like they're the goose that lays the golden egg, but he's got to wring its neck first. So yeah, it's kind of horrifying.
That question had to be litigated before they could even charge him with anything. So what came as a result of that was a, you know, like a landmark decision that yes, a white man can be prosecuted for killing an Indian. Because at that point, there was no precedent. So when you look at it from that standpoint, that helps answer that question, doesn't it? When you say, how could this have happened? Well, because the mindset of that day was that we weren't equal. We were subhuman. We were of little value. Even though we were wealthy, our lives were cheap.
But you got to remember one thing, is that everybody who was involved in the murder and the killing never spent much time in prison. Bill Hale did, but he died a free man, and I remember when he died. The Burkharts died free men. One of them in the 1980s, you know. Kelsey Morrison, well, he was a free man, but he was killed right downtown by Fairfax policemen.
And you know, and unfortunately, it wasn't the first time. There was a lot of Osages that lost elders and family members, and even if it was by accident, I mean, they'll never know. A lot of murders were accidents. You know, they were defined as like, he just committed suicide. He drank alcohol poisoning. He drove his car down a ravine. You know, and they were just not considered. They weren't investigated. They weren't looked into, and we'll never know how many people died during that period of time.
Oh, we're not victims. We're warriors, absolute warriors. Strength, the strength from our old ways and our elders, because the love, oh my God, the love from an elder, from your grandparents, your great-grandparents, great aunts and uncles, that absolute love that we receive from them, it just makes you so strong. And I know that's what strengthened my parents, and also it was them too. It was a time, everything was changing.
Legacy is usually defined by your offspring. And Mom was declared an orphan by the time she was probably 4 or 5 years old. She was born in 1925, 2 years after he died. or murdered. So, in Mom's case, Mom and Dad had 7 kids. Big family, big Osage family, and I think that Henry Roan's legacy is that all 7 kids have married and had children themselves, and their children are having children. The legacy of Henry Roan is that there's about 130 of us now. And I think I think he would smile if he knew that.